Okay, Steve.
All right. Well, just one second. There we go. So welcome everybody. This was not really the weather and kind of day that I was hoping we would experience. Grenache, kind of the focus today is something that really likes a little warmer weather, a little more sunshine. So keep all of that in mind as the skies open up and rain on us. But as we're drinking Grenache, but Grenache is something that I think wine drinkers should definitely be aware of. It's a very versatile. Well, actually, let's back up. So Grenache is a grape. It's a grape that for a long time, Spain and France were sort of arguing about where it truly originated because both use it extensively and are both very proud of their Grenache. And then it was a number of years. I think it's been maybe a decade now. They were doing some archaeological digs in Sardinia, off the coast of Italy, and they discovered that there were remnants in pottery that after DNA testing turned out to be Grenache, and these seeds and skins, the pips seeds, revealed that Grenache had been in Sardinia probably about 1,000 years prior. So it was to when Spain and France started seeing it in their wine production. So the answer really, where did it originate? Well, it wasn't Spain or France, even though a lot of that data has not been updated. It was it the early versions of it were found in Sardinia, where they still make it. They call it Canonau. And it is a delicious wine if you ever encounter it, but it that is the epicenter. So it left Sardinia and it made its way to Spain, and I mean to France and the Iberian Peninsula, because both Spain and Portugal utilize this grape. It today it there are, I would guess, between 525 and over a well, I would guess it's close to about a 500,000 acres globally. In the early 2020s, it was just under a 500,000, and we're seeing more. So I would assume that popularity has increased planting. So roughly about a 500,000 acres around the world. It grows in Spain, it grows in France, it grows in Portugal, it grows. Australia actually does quite well with Grenache. The central coast of California, which we will taste a selection from Ballard Canyon, which is a sub-region of Santa Barbara County. So it's a very well-traveled grape, but what I like about it, aside from its history and aside from the fact that it's really been, in the places that it's been grown extensively, namely France and Spain, the quality and the nuance of that grape. I mean, it's been given so much attention for so long that they've really dialed it in. And it's a very versatile grape. I mean, it produces wine. And I don't know if you've poured both wines, but certainly, I would say if you haven't poured the red Grenache, you might pour it now just to give it some a little bit of air. But you can see here, I mean, it's the same grape, and yet they clearly look very different. They taste different. And you would use them really in different ways. The rosé, this light, juicy. It's got some tannin, it's got some alcohol, it's got some weight, but it's fairly, it's a fairly casual sit outside, have before dinner aperitivo kind of wine. Whereas the other that we'll taste is a little fuller bodied, a little darker, a little more structured. And that applies to, you can certainly serve different foods with these. You can, different times of day, different styles of your mood. I mean, if, it can be formal and casual. So Grenache is one that I think really it's a grape that people should know because, again, very versatile. It shows up in many forms. You can buy bottles of Grenache that would retail for maybe 10, 12, $15, all the way up to, well over 100, in several hundreds of dollars for bottlings. So it doesn't have an extended ageability. I would say it's probably closer to 10 to 12, 15 years, in its ideal form, but it's inexpensive and relatively accessible, and so it's really a quite nice grape to know, particularly if you're out having dinner. You can find really good values on wine lists in restaurants, so it's quite nice. So let's trying to think if there's anything else you need to know about this grape. It is so part of what determines where it does best is its natural growing characteristics. Some vines will travel very well. They go all over the world. They don't really mind rooting in new soil. Grenache is unique in the sense that it ripens late. And so it really needs an area that has a fair amount of warmth, and where winter doesn't jump in very quickly. So it needs that low and slow kind of barbecue style growing season. But outside of that, it does travel well. So the first wine that we're going to taste is from Ballard Canyon. It's from a producer called Stoltman. Personal favorite. I love these guys. They do a great job. I mean, they're just good people, and they make really good wine. But part of their advantage is that they figured out that there were certain grapes that would grow well in their property based on their uh, elevation and orientation and aspect and everything else and soil structure. And so they sort of deferred to the grapes of southern France, of Syrah, Grenache, Mourvèdre, Cinsault, and then some other kind of wild card wines. They do Sangiovese, they do Gamay. So they've got, but for the most part, the wines that do best in this area are these southern French Rhone varietals, of which Grenache is a part. So this wine is it's made in a style. Well, first of all, rosé. The production of rosé begins with picking fruit at a certain ripeness level, and that's determined by kind of how much alcohol they want left in the wine and what the objective of the winemaker is. But the fruit is harvested. It's then brought in and sorted, and then it's gently crushed. And really, there are times where they will actually just allow the weight of the grapes to crush themselves. There's no actual pressure being applied to them. In other instances, they will actually expand an inflatable bladder inside the tank, which pushes them against each other and applies pressure. But for the most part, they don't want to really, I mean, they're not in there stomping on it. You're not seeing the grapes really being forcefully crushed because they want the juice, which provides kind of the chemical base for the wine. And then they want a little bit of color, and they want the phenolic compounds that are found in the skin, the things that will make the wine smell and taste. And so they give it a very gentle pressing, and usually the skins of the grapes are removed fairly quickly afterward. I mean, it could be a matter of hours, it could be a day or two, but it really the skins, which have all of that color, and a lot of flavor, they don't want that in this wine, so they're removed. And then the wine is fermented to complete dryness, or usually to complete dryness. Um, in the case of this wine, this is what's referred to as a carbonic macerated wine. And it's sort of, nerdy wine geekery kind of stuff, but carbonic maceration is where instead of yeast attacking the sugars and converting it into CO2 and alcohol. Um, the grapes are put into, and usually in their entire cluster, the whole cluster is the whole bunch of grapes with stems and seeds and everything else in that, in a tank that is then sealed. And the tank is then blanketed with CO2. And the addition of that CO2, that really CO2 rich environment, causes the chemistry inside the grape, which again still has its skin on. Chemistry inside of the grape starts to ferment. The it, basically you get the same process going on in that grape that you would get with yeast, but in the complete absence of yeast. Now, unfortunately, I mean, yeast is still needed. Unfortunately, carbonic maceration doesn't take the baton very far down the road, down the track. It usually drops off at 2 to maybe 3.5% alcohol, and then yeast is used to finish it. But that process of carbonic maceration changes the chemistry, and it imparts. Oftentimes, you can kind of smell in the wine. There's a little bit of well, as a kid of the 70s and 80s, like Hubba Bubba, or maybe Bazooka Joe bubble gum in the background. Again, no bubble gum in the wine, but that is the aroma that is created through carbonic maceration. So when you smell a wine and you get a little whiff of bubble gum, probably the wine has been vinified in this way. Uh, so the other issue that you'll notice, I mean, and in this wine, when you do whole cluster, you get a little bit of kind of almost a stemmy, woody note in the background. Now, this wine, rosé, doesn't really want that, because that's sort of a distraction. So it's just very light, but you get a little bit of stemminess in the background. But that is, so this is a rosé. Normally, this wine, again, called I Love You Bunches, which is the reference to whole cluster fermentation. But normally this wine is done using Sangiovese grapes, but they decided to switch to Grenache, in part because they really, I mean, it is a very classic rosé. The wines of Provence, the beautiful wines of Provence, are usually Grenache driven. And so they switched to this. This is one of the first vintages, or maybe even the first vintage, of carbonic macerated Grenache. So let's give the wine a little swirl and taste the wine, and we'll go from there. Yeah, see, on the nose, yeah, a little bit of strawberry bubble gum. The Grenache, as far as things to look for in the wine, Grenache, every grape kind of has a palette of flavors and aromas that are just kind of natural and native to that grape. For Grenache, you want to look for things like strawberry, real bright kind of cherry berry tones. There sometimes, again, you'll get a little bit of a vegetal note, or maybe almost like an unburned tobacco leaf, like a pipe tobacco, kind of in the background, but very, very fruit driven, and a good amount of acidity. But yeah, I can smell there's a little bit of that strawberry bubble gum on the nose, which suggests that it probably, well, we know it was, but that would be a tell that it might be. Great texture, light, bright acid. The tongue kind of waters, it continues to water. You taste, again, that kind of that cherry berry medley. I don't get a ton of citrus on this one, maybe a little tangerine, but it really is leading with that cherry berry note. And I can still, now I can kind of taste a little bit of that bubblegum note. But no, Grenache Rosé, it stands well by itself. And it stands very well with food because it's got that bright acidity and those nice berry tones that kind of stand up. I mean, it goes well with cheese. Just a very versatile wine. And again, while this is exclusively a rosé of Grenache, you will find the great rosés of Provence will again have a lot of Grenache in them, and they use other grapes as well in some cases, but this is a good domestic example of kind of those flavor profiles. Does anybody have any questions on the rosé, or any additional comments about it?
We have a small group, so if you have a comment or a question, just go ahead and unmute and we can chat that way. It'll be a lot easier than me trying to read it.
Yeah. Well, if nobody has any questions, that's not a problem. We can continue on. But no, I like Grenache. I mean, it's a great little kind of, we would characterize this almost like a picnic wine, something that you could pair with a lot of luncheon foods. It's typically a little bit lighter in alcohol than red wine or whites. Well, there are some whites that are in the same range, but typically lighter than alcohol than reds. But just a really pretty wine. Again, I was hoping that we would have some weather that would appreciate this, but it is not to be had today. But
I can turn the heat up in the house.
yeah, right. Yeah,
Any
Jack, what
excuse.
are what are you having today for your food?
Today I'm trying this with, I made some little tartlets with mushroom crab and a relish aioli, which are
Mm,
really good with it. And then I have these giant shrimps that my brother-in-law sent us, and I made um, a mayonnaise with paprika, Spanish smoked paprika, and horseradish with that. And it's nice with both of them. If I had a choice for this, I think I'd probably go with the mushroom.
mm.
You know, the aioli has a little bit of sweetness in it, but the mushroom has a lot of unami, and it seems to work really well with it.
Well, it's funny that Grenache or Grenache blends are very common in northern Spain. So, well, actually, I should back up. This grape is very common in both. I mean, it really throughout northern Spain. There are some regions within northern Spain. Northeastern Spain typically uses it a little bit more than northwestern Spain, but the northern part of Spain uses this, and when you go into the bars and restaurants for well, what they call pinchos, but tapas, you see mushrooms, you see crab, you see roasted red pepper, and all of those things, to really all the things that you
Yeah.
mentioned, uh
It's really
quite
nice
well.
with it. And it stands alone also for me very well also.
Yep.
And it, you know, it's nice to have a rose. It's I as a rosé, I think it's pretty dry, which is really a nice thing.
Well, and rosé is funny because it's something that has not been universally loved over time. I mean, when I started selling wine, rosé was really more thought of as White Zinfandel, which was not White Zinfandel is a blush wine that, yes, could, I mean, there are actually some delicious drier White Zin, but the original White Zinfandel was actually something that came about as an accident, um, and wasn't really intended to have that level of sweetness, because sugar is fine, sugar is great, and certainly if the grapes didn't have a natural level of sugar, we wouldn't like it. I mean, uh, you know, typically you're looking for that balance, and really good fruit at good ripeness levels. That's what you end up getting. You end up getting that perfect sugar and acid balance. And so, but yeah, the original rosé. I mean, the original understanding of rosé was sort of distorted when white zin came around, because it really took us a long time to get back to a place where, I mean, where I learned about rosé was really, rosé was what the winemaker would make for him or herself. It really was. There was no. It was most certainly not a second class product, and it was just made in really small amounts. And so when winemakers would, issue new releases, typically it was like, well, hey, we've got lots of this red and lots of this white, and you can have like a case or two of the rosé. It really was a special thing. And so, but no, most rosés, most good rosés, I will say there is, as the popularity of rosé has increased, the abundance of not so great rosé has increased as well. I mean, there really is stuff that is just not good, and I say that not as really as an opinion. It's just, as we said earlier, it's about balance, and the problem is these lesser rosés don't display a level of balance. You taste it, and you want to have some water after that, and that's not a good sign. I mean, you should the balance of the wine should finish such that you're not really needing a tug of water to make it all work. But yeah, rosé is, the better rosés, and there's a ton of those out there. Really food friendly. They're just, I mean, they're beautiful. I mean, they have a color that just, it's kind of like spring in a glass or summer in a glass. It has a color that we don't see all year round. And so, it's funny. I mean, that you think about Provence. I mean, the gardens are spectacular, and this is what you would want to drink in those gardens as you're walking around and smelling the flowers. This is a walk around, smell the flowers kind of wine. It's rosés. I've had people say, I don't get them. There's not much going on. Well, the reality is there it's an expectation thing. I mean, again, in the better examples of rosé, they're not supposed to be transcendent. They're supposed to make you smile. They're supposed to, they're supposed to appeal to your sense of, hey, it's a nice day, I'm sitting outside kind of thing. And there's no, you're not going to learn the mysteries of life in a glass of rosé. You're just going to be reminded that if you're just sitting and enjoying it, you're probably doing the right thing. And so they're funny things. I mean, like I said, there's some stuff out there that, I mean, I taste a lot of wine where I just can't even imagine somebody really embracing that experience, because it is Coca-Cola, for example, not an overly complex flavor palette, but if part of it's off, if you're getting it out of a soda machine, and the gun is not calibrated properly, and there's too much carbonation, or there's not enough carbonation, or too much syrup, it tastes weird. And that is a balance thing. And so that's really, that's kind of what defines a good wine, but specifically a good rosé from a bad one, is that it should be balanced, and that so it should have balanced alcohol, balanced acid, balanced sweetness. Everything should be in check. And um, probably, if there is one thing that it would lead with, it would be acidity. I mean, you do want, a little bit more acid than you have sugar, just to carry, kind of force the mouth to water, and to refresh the palate. But that's what rosé does. So, I mean, I encourage everybody. It's a wonderful style of wine. It just kind of, I don't know. It's like sitting on a park bench, watching the birds. I mean, it's not horrible. It's not a horrible experience. And that's what rosé. Rosé is a sitting on the park bench watching the birds.
Steve, I just wanted to ask you what your recommendations for rosés across the spectrum of different grapes would be.
Oh
How
yeah,
would
yeah.
Grenache rosé stack?
Absolutely. So, I mean, that's a great question. So, rosé can be made out of any grape, any red grape. And there is a lot that will get made, and I would say some are great examples, and others are not bad examples, they're just better ones. I mean, as an example, um, well, white Zinfandel as an example. The Zinfandel grape wants to make a lot of sugar. It generates a lot of sugar inside the grape, which either has to be converted into alcohol or left in the wine. Zinfandel also has a fairly thick skin, which has bitterness aspects to it. And so, yes, there are some absolutely wonderful white zins that are dry, but an effort has to be made to make those wines right. Generally, if you have a whole bunch of super ripe Zinfandel, it's not going to make a great rosé. You would probably want to pick it a little earlier in the harvest so that the sugar levels were lower and the acid levels were higher. Simply because it wants to make sugar. Cabernet is another example. I've had many rosés of Cabernet that I've liked, but I've probably had more examples that I was not thrilled with. I love Cabernet, but again, it as a grape has a lot of sugar or a decent amount of sugar, has a fairly low level of acidity. It often needs acid than has excess acid, and it's got a really thick skin. And so that skin is going to impart again color, body, and tannin. And so they're wines that I mean, Malbec is another wine. It can make great rosé if it's grown at high elevation and the sugar levels are kept low and it's picked early. You get the essence of that grape, but you don't get the weight and the all of the other things. So it really Pinot Noir is one of my favorite rosés. It has a very thin skin. It has really bright strawberry, raspberry, cherry flavors that you can kind of harness in that wine. Um, but it works well because it has both high acid, it's lower in sugar naturally, and a thin skin that's not going to have bitterness. So as I said, you can make wine out of a rosé out of a whole bunch of different red grapes. And I won't say that one is I mean there's certainly natural advantages that cooler climate, lower sugar, higher acid wines do for rosé, but that is not, I mean, certainly not exclusive. There are definitely exceptions, but the interesting thing is there in when you change some of the winemaking aspects, you can get wines. I mean, in the wintertime, there's a wine that we carry from the south of France called Tavel. And Tavel is I mean, it looks like kind of a maybe dark watermelon or cranberry color. It has a fairly deep red color relative to rosé. But it has more weight in the mouth. It's a little fuller bodied, and I love it in the wintertime just because, it has a little more weight to it and still balanced, but not as bright. I mean, this I would say is something that, I mean, you can certainly find much lighter bodied wines than this. Even though I find this fairly light bodied, there are much lighter versions. But yeah, it is possible to leave you basically what happens is they'll leave the skins in contact with the juice a little bit longer, and you get more color and more extraction from those grapes and a little weightier of a wine. But I mean, I know certainly I drink Tavel year round, but for me, I like those fuller bodied rosés for a little cooler weather. It still has that brightness, that fruit flavor, that kind of visit to the fruit stand, but just a touch more weight, because there are times in the winter. I mean, if it's 20 degrees outside, a really light bright wine is, it may feel thin, it may taste thin to you. You might want a little, it's um, a cotton sheet versus a wool blanket at that time, the choice is probably going to lean toward the wool blanket. And so, but yeah, so anyway, kind of rambled there, but yes, many grapes can be utilized for rosé. And usually it's done with a very specific goal in mind of, how do we get to the balance that we're looking for? So when do we need to pick, and when do we need to, how long do we ferment them? And all of those decisions are made really kind of as the grapes are ripening, and the winemaker figures out what they're going to go for.
I know
Hope,
I know we're supposed to be kind of talking about Grenache, but
yeah.
in line with what Cliff just said, are most of the French rosés Pinot Noir?
Oh no, French rosés cover like a
The
wide
whole
spectrum.
spectrum. Okay.
Yeah, no, in
All right.
fact, I mean, if you go to Bordeaux, you will find rosé that are cab based. Um, and you go to the Loire Valley, you may have rosés that are Cabernet Franc or Pinot Noir based. And then there's certainly little sub-regions where they're using indigenous grapes, or grapes that are lesser known on the international scene, that they're using for production rosé. No, it France as a growing region is very regional. I mean, I mean, as a large growing region is very regional, and so what one region will grow and how they'll make their wine is very kind of unique. I mean, I think that, if somebody, I mean, Provence style rosé, it really is. Um, it's not that they all taste the same, but if we put all the Provence style rosés in a line, and then put a flight of Pinot Noir, and then maybe put a flight of Malbec or Cabernet, they would all stand out differently, even though they were all rosé. But yeah, France is very much dialed into where that wine comes from, and as to what they're doing with it. But um, I think everybody just loves rosé enough that, they're always going to figure out how to make it work, wherever they are. Are we ready to move on to the red? And any more questions on Grenache? Good to go?
Good to go.
All right. So we're going to switch gears so you can see just the difference in color here. So the vast difference in color. There we go. Same grape, grown in different regions, but vinified very differently. This Grenache is from northeastern Spain. It's made by a winemaker who is really, he's been, people have been following his career for a while. His name is Raul Perez, and he's kind of sort of a wild looking guy. He has a big flowing beard and hair pulled back into a ponytail, but his and he's not doing what we would consider to be classic Spanish wines. And that's really his signature. He does not want to do classic Spanish wines. He wants to harness all of the great things that Spain has, and focus on it, but have these be very site specific. So he's very much about finding vineyards that kind of speak to him, where that's what he wants to do. This is an expression of this place at this time. And I don't want to do, all I'm doing is just putting it into a vessel. I don't want to mess with it. So I think he's gonna, I mean, he's got an amazing reputation. People, you know, they want him. He attracts people from around the world to come consult for him. I mean, he really is a very, very forward-thinking wine professional, winemaker. But Raul Perez, crazy guy. But this is his Grenache, I believe 2018. Yes, 2018. Um, it is so it saw a different process. It was not fermented carbonically, although from the nose it smells like he did use some whole cluster. There's a stemminess, kind of a woody stemminess to the wine on the top that might suggest that he used a little whole cluster. Um, it did go into oak barrels. Think he actually used Hungarian, or it's an interesting oak regiment. It escapes me what it was, but sort of a more most European oak differs drastically from American oak. American oak is really defined by aromas of vanilla, um, dill pickle. Those are things that are markers for American oak. European oak, French oak primarily, but there are other European oak species that are used. Generally have more spice to them. They don't have as much vanilla. They have more baking spice, pepper, things like that. And so I'm getting some of that. But I mean, this is just it's a sort of a brooding like wine. I mean, it smells like, you know, roasted plum, whereas the rosé was more fresh fruit. Now the fruit is maybe stewed or macerated or roasted, but it's not at that freshness level. It's a little bit reduced, I guess, you know, not reduced in this in the winemaking sense, but reduced is like reduced in a pan with some sugar, cooked down. Um, so but yeah, like really a crazy exotic nose. Lots of dark spice, um, cherry, plum skin, um, maybe some strawberry. There really is some sort of exotic wood like sandalwood or something like that, kind of tucked in the background. But um, so I mean, a lot more tannin, still has a good amount of acidity. Um, Alcohol wise, I think they're pretty close. No, not close. Well, actually, sadly, close today. 11.5 and 13.5. Um, now that may in fact be closer than it seems, because you can be plus or minus 1 degree on your labels. So one could be more, one could be less. Anyway. But 13.5 actually is a very classic alcohol level. And that is something that Raul Perez has wanted to do. I mean, and I think it's something that a lot of winemakers are looking at. Um, there was a time where, and part of it is in fact climate change, but it's not all climate change, because a winemaker can choose to pick when they want to pick. They don't have to pick at certain ripeness levels if they don't want to. Now, it may not make the wine they're wanting to make, but there is some flexibility about when picking. So, but a lot of what came about with higher alcohol wines was really popular demand. People liked the idea that it was a bigger, boozier, brawnier red, and the problem is back to the balance thing. It became out of balance. There was too much alcohol. There was too much extraction. If you weren't eating a bloody steak with compound butter, there wasn't enough fat in your meal to carry the weight of this big brawny tannic wine. And And so a lot of winemakers these days are actually kind of going back and like, I mean, because historically, 12.5 to 13.5% alcohol for reds was very, very common. And now it's more like 14 to 16. And so a lot of winemakers are trying to move back toward that because the wines, I would argue that they drink better. They're certainly more versatile with food, with that lower alcohol, and the public is actually choosing to prefer. I mean, they would rather have lower alcohol wines these days than have certainly been common in the 90s and the aughts. But this is a wine, so Raul Perez is trying to trying to craft the wine such that it hits that alcohol level. But Grenache as a red wine, again, very versatile. It has a good amount of acidity, and I'll always say, I mean, acidity is really a helpful tool in food. It causes you to taste more, to flavors expand with the right amount of acid, and so acidity is great for that. Tannin, the dryness that you get from that wine, that helps temper kind of richness and fat. So it's again, it's helping with the balance. And Grenache is, I mean, in the region in northern Spain where this is consumed, I mean, they eat a lot of, certainly a lot of pork, usually in the form of jamón, the cured ham, but they eat a lot of pork. They eat lamb, very rich wine. I mean, very rich protein. So it loves something to compare it to contrast it. They also eat a lot of things from the ocean. And so you want a wine that's fairly versatile, that will pair with multiple different proteins. Maybe it's just cheese, maybe it's just by itself. It needs it needs that chemistry to work in that way. And the I don't know exactly why this is, but it's funny because a lot of where Spain, where Grenache has found its favor in Spain, they have a lot of foods that are fairly rich and slow cooked. I mean, stew, I guess, would be kind of a general way of thinking about it. But if you go to France, the same wine is doing the work in the same place. I mean, in France, the southern Rhone Valley, where they grow a ton of Grenache, lamb is a lamb and game birds are things that show up on tables very regularly, and it's that this things that grow together go together concept. It seems to play out very well across the board, where you find the same styles of foods are being consumed with the same styles of wine, regardless of where they are. But yeah, this is, and I would encourage, if you're, you don't feel compelled to finish the bottle tonight, because I mean, I'm getting a little bit of floral notes, kind of like a sort of a purple. I don't know. I've got a lot of lilac bushes that are blossoming, so it may just be kind of what I'm smelling around me. But lilac and lilac and sandalwood. That's what my wine smells like right now. But it's really, it's kind of changing. But no, I think as we go into the warmer months, these are two wines, same grape, that are just really versatile wines. They're going to cover a lot of food that is seasonal. Lighter proteins, lighter, less fat and cholesterol kind of things. Usually it kind of shows up a little bit in the shows up more in the winter months and less in the summer months. And so, you've got these wines that are very versatile in that respect. So I would encourage people, like, again, if you're out in restaurants, you can find some really good bottles of, French Grenache or Spanish. The Spanish will call it Garnacha. But and again, that's also the Cannonau grape of Sardinia. So many names for the most part genetically the same thing. But you can find some really great values. don't have to spend a lot of money to get good examples of these grapes. And where you find these grapes, they really do love kind of the style of eating that most people have, which is um, not comfort foodie, but fairly straightforward, fairly simple, not certainly not fancy food kind of presentations or preparations. So
Steve, I have a question. Grenache is obviously made in a ton of places. Is there a characteristic by area as opposed to winemaker, like is the French Grenache or the Spanish Grenache or the California Grenache? Are there things that you would look for because of the way the grape is there that would give you a note in that locale?
um, I would say I think I tend to notice more the style that it's made in. I mean, for example, Grenache from Australia. They do some nice Grenache down there, but it it's not, I mean, it's weightier, it's boozier. And that's partly the climate, but that is also the intent of their style. Australian wines, they like big, bold, punch you in the face kinds of wines. And so I mean, there's certainly some great examples of Australian Grenache that is a little bit lighter and livelier, and lower in alcohol. The style really does. I mean, the general thought of style is for that bigger, boozier, brawnier style. But Spain is that too. I mean, there are, trying to think. There's a wow, it's escaping my head. I just had it. There's a very well-known Grenache from Spain that is, I mean, it should come with a steak knife. It's a big wine. And yet, you can go just a further, I mean, and this one is going to be more centrally located, a little warmer of a climate. But if in the northern parts of Spain, they are a little bit lighter. So I would say to answer your question, it depends on where it's grown and who's making it. Because there's certainly styles that I mean, there are definitely contrasting styles. I mean, there's Paso Robles, California. So in the California region, this particular Grenache is coming from a region that, I mean, the Love You Bunches rosé is coming from a region that is fairly close to the ocean, relatively speaking. There are no mountain ranges blocking winds coming off the ocean, so they get these nice, cool Pacific breezes, which really help extend the growing season and drag it out. I mean, it keeps the vines cool enough such that they don't see rapid ripening. But you go to Paso Robles, and I've had Grenache from Paso, which is, I don't know, maybe an hour and a half drive. And
Not even that.
yeah, the Grenache of Paso, I mean, it can almost look like port and drink like port. I mean, where it pours out, and it's 16.5% alcohol, dark as night, and just big. But that's also, and it may be, I should say, Paso is changing their approach. That was sort of a signature style of Paso for a long time, that their wines were just over the top, every single one of them. And they are looking, they're like everybody else, sort of backing away from the precipice, because they took it to the edge, and it's just, there's nowhere else to go. I mean, wine yeast dies at 17%. So, you're gonna have to craft some new yeast or something to get it to any hotter than it is. But I think, yeah, I mean, so maybe that didn't answer the question, but I would say the markers are more how, like, if I have a really, really rich Spanish Grenache, I'm gonna think of certain regions over others. Or maybe, oh, I'm smelling, really ripe fruit. Very fruit forward, maybe a little kiss of eucalyptus or something like that, and oh, that could be Australia. But they're the regions that do it well, are, I mean, some are more food forward, some are more mineral driven, but they're all kind of unique.
Yeah. Shelley put a question in to the chat. So are Grenache vines grown more easily than other grapes? It seems that they're grown in so many locales.
Well, yes, but as I said earlier, the problem with them, and that is a problem. I mean, you know, climate change is very real to wine growers, and regions across around the world are adjusting. And one of the issues that they have to address is certain areas that used to have very consistent growing seasons are now being abbreviated. Maybe it stays colder longer in the spring and it gets colder earlier in the summer or in the fall. And that changes the way the grape grows. So a grape like Grenache really needs that low and slow environment. And so there are going to be some places where Grenache probably doesn't have the growing season it needs. It's either too short on one end, or it's not as precise as it was. It really does need like nice, slow, moderate warm temperatures throughout the growing season, with no abrupt, frosts or hail or anything else that shows up at the wrong time. So that's probably going to make it more limited overall. And it does very well in Santa Barbara, because Santa Barbara's got a nice cool ocean right next to it. It's got mountains, so you've got air that's moving around and it's cooling off. But in other areas where you might have heat spikes. I mean, that's the other thing. Grenache doesn't just want blazing hot weather. It needs that cool off at night. And so it I mean, all grapes, regardless of varietal, are going to be challenged, because where they have been planted historically may not be where they want to be planted in the future. There certainly, I mean, the region of Bordeaux has added grapes that are not native to Bordeaux, but are native to Spain and Portugal, and they need these grapes for as an insurance policy. And if because some grapes they will choose some grapes because they ripen faster, or they ripen within a window that's I guess a safer window than its historic one. I mean, it's lots of things are being shuffled around, but I think Grenache probably, given that it does like warmer temperatures. I mean, certainly Pinot Noir has more of a threat, because Pinot Noir likes more cooler temperatures, and those are getting harder to find. But Grenache doesn't want blazing hot temperatures all the time. So it kind of, I think it probably is going to be a grape that you see more of, just because of its 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 uh it enjoys warmer weather, but that said, it's going to be restricted to the places that still have fairly predictable warm weather, and not kind of the herky jerky stuff.
More questions, anyone? The one question I had, and I'm trying to think back, is Grenache a grape that's around in South America, Argentina, Chile, or am I imagining things?
I would yes, they do use it in some places. I mean, certainly other varietals in that kind of, family exist. It, I mean, and it certainly could grow. I mean, it has obviously potential in Australia. So other southern,
Right.
well, Actually, South Africa does a lot with Grenache.
Ah,
Yeah. There are definitely some southern hemisphere players in the Grenache game as well. And that, it's funny, the South Africa, as an example, they like these grapes because they are fairly tolerant of warmth. They've got skins that are thick enough to retain moisture in maybe heat or drought. But and they really do produce some compelling wines. But yeah, there are a number of South African producers. I was trying to, but I'm struggling to think of Chile and Argentina. I mean, I'm certain they grow it. It escapes me, and
I don't know where that came from. It just, in my mind somewhere, I thought I had one, but I'm
yeah.
at that age where I could have imagined anything. So,
Well, like, there are a lot of grapes from Spain and Portugal that are making their way down to,
yeah.
to South America and are showing up. So, yeah, yes, there are a number of Southern Hemisphere wine regions that are growing it, but I can't think of any Chilean
If
or
you can't think of them, I'm going to go with I probably imagined that I had it. So,
No. Honestly, it could. I mean,
yeah,
I love. I mean, I taste a lot of wine that I'm always tasting new things. So, the fact that I haven't had, well, and I'm sure I've even had them. At the moment, I just can't think of a good example of that. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I had the weird experience of I became more of a wine taster when we lived in California for a while because it's California and you go to wine festivals and it's kind of cool.
yeah.
And and so when I tasted Garnache from Spain, it's like, wait a minute, it's almost like it's not the same thing to me, but it was really interesting because I'd only tasted it from California for much of my life,
Yeah.
or much of that part of my life, and it's significantly different, but it's sounding like it's significantly different based on where the winemaker takes it.
Yeah. I mean, and like I said, I have had, I can't think of. Well, no, I'm sure I've had some lighter style Grenache from like Paso, but yeah, I've had really behemoth wines from Grenache based from Paso, and this area, wow, yeah, the Spanish Grenache that, um it's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, yeah, no, it really is. The winemaker has a lot of control over that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're getting pretty much near the end. If there's a quick question, we can sneak it in. If not, we're going to call it an evening, and hopefully you're going to go back and polish off a little bit more of this delicious wine tonight with some dinner or without some dinner or however you'd like to do that. I know I am. So meanwhile, we'll see you at the next month at Wine Around the World or whatever next event you care to join with Retroactive. Have a good evening, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Have a good
Thanks.
one. Be well.
Thanks, Steve.
Cheers.